Ma'am, you do realize we have the bank transfer receipts, the texts, and the security camera footage of you taking the envelope marked, rent plus bond, out of his mailbox. The county fraud investigator's voice was steady and professional as he spoke to Margaret Peton, our HOA treasurer. Margaret blinked rapidly, her bright red lipstick twitching at the corners. That wasn't theft, she said with an indignant tone. That was simply oversight recovery for administrative costs. The investigator leaned forward slightly. You called it a gift from the week in a group text, Margaret. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Daniel, and I'm a disabled veteran who had just moved into a cozy duplex in the Maplewood Gardens subdivision. After my injury overseas, I relied on my wheelchair, monthly care visits, and my service dog, Duke, to get through each day. The duplex was perfect for my needs, with ramps and wide doorways, and it was part of an HOA-managed rental enclave. The person in charge of managing these rentals was none other than Margaret Peton, age 63, interim HOA treasurer, amateur floral arrangement judge, and self-declared guardian of community standards. From day one, she made it clear she didn't think I belonged in her precious neighborhood. She would walk past my home daily, clipboard in hand, noting every imaginary infraction, from my wheelchair ramp being 2 inches too far onto the sidewalk to Duke's water bowl being visible from the street. When I signed my lease, the instructions were clear. I needed to pay both my rent and security bond up front, totaling $2,900. Following the HOA instructions to the letter, I placed the cash in a clearly labeled envelope that read, Rent plus bond for Unit 12, Daniel Morrison, and dropped it in the designated HOA mailbox outside the community center. I even took photos of myself placing it in the box, timestamped at 10:15 a.m. on March 3rd. Within an hour, that envelope had vanished, and my nightmare began. Margaret started spinning an elaborate web of lies that would make a spider jealous. First, she claimed with a confused tone that she had never received any payment from me. When I showed her my photos, she shifted tactics, insisting I had misunderstood the process and used the wrong mailbox. Then she implied the envelope was possibly destroyed during HOA mailroom pest control procedures, which was particularly rich since there hadn't been any pest control that month. The notices started arriving at my door like clockwork: delinquent rent payment, past due immediately. Unpaid security bond jeopardizes your lease agreement. Failure to comply within 7 days may result in HOA-driven eviction procedures. Each one was hand-delivered by Margaret herself, who would ring my doorbell repeatedly until I answered, then lecture me about personal responsibility while Duke growled softly from behind my wheelchair. I stayed calm and methodical, requesting documentation of these supposed missing payments. Margaret would promise to get back to me, then delay for days. When I followed up, she would claim she was too busy with important HOA business to deal with my incompetence. She even had the audacity to suggest that perhaps my disability made it difficult for me to remember whether I had actually paid or not. For 2 weeks, she completely ghosted me, refusing to answer emails or return calls. Then she reappeared with a new story. The HOA board never officially approved your lease anyway, she announced with a triumphant tone at my doorstep. You'll need to vacate within 30 days. What Margaret didn't know was that I had been recording every interaction on my phone. Every message was screenshot. Every receipt was saved. Every hostile encounter was documented. My military training had taught me the importance of keeping detailed records, and I was building quite the file on our dear HOA treasurer. The turning point came during the spring Maplewood Community Wine and Cheese Stroll, an event I wasn't invited to but heard about from my neighbor Robert. Margaret, after several glasses of Sauvignon Blanc, had gotten loose-lipped with fellow board member Jennifer Hayes. According to Jennifer, Margaret had laughed and said with a slightly slurred voice, "I found $2,900 in that poor guy's mailbox. Told you all he was too naive to read the fine print." These disabled types never understand how the real world works. What Margaret didn't realize was that Jennifer had been recording their conversation. Jennifer was still bitter about the Thanksgiving pie judging scandal where Margaret had disqualified her entry for having a store-bought crust despite no such rule existing. That recording made its way to me within 24 hours, delivered personally by Jennifer with a satisfied smile. Armed with this evidence, I contacted legal aid, the housing board, the local news station, and the county fraud office. The story spread through Maplewood Gardens faster than Margaret could walk with her clipboard. Neighbors who had kept quiet about their own issues with Margaret suddenly found their voices. It turned out I wasn't the only tenant with mysteriously lost funds. An official inquiry was launched immediately. My receipts, photos, and digital evidence painted a crystal-clear picture of theft and fraud. The investigation revealed that Margaret had intercepted my rent and bond payment, cashed it through a personal account she had labeled HOA Recovery Fund, and then systematically lied about it for months. Bank records showed she had used the money for a cruise to the Bahamas, which she had posted about extensively on social media with captions about living her best life. The HOA board, suddenly desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, held an emergency meeting. They voted unanimously to suspend Margaret from all responsibilities and opened their books for a full forensic audit. What they found was shocking. Over the past 3 years, nearly $40,000 in various fees, fines, and payments had been diverted to Margaret's personal accounts. Other tenants came forward with their own stories. Sarah from Unit 8 had paid a landscaping fee that never made it to any landscaper. Tom from Unit 15 had submitted a security deposit that Margaret claimed was never received. The list went on and on, each story more outrageous than the last. Margaret tried to defend herself at the emergency HOA meeting, standing at the podium with her trademark clipboard. "These are all misunderstandings," she said with a desperate tone. "I've devoted my life to maintaining the standards of this community. Sometimes leadership requires making difficult decisions that others don't understand." The room erupted in angry voices. Someone shouted that stealing wasn't leadership, it was theft. Another person demanded she return every penny. Margaret's face turned bright red as she clutched her clipboard like a shield. When the county investigator arrived at her door with fraud charges, Margaret attempted to barricade herself inside using her collection of garden gnomes. She had lined them up across her doorway while shouting through the door that this was all a conspiracy by jealous neighbors who couldn't appreciate her vision for the community. It didn't work. The officers simply moved the gnomes aside and served her with papers. Her mugshot appeared on the front page of the Maplewood Gazette the next morning. Even in the photo, her bright red lipstick was perfectly applied, though her expression was one of complete shock. The headline read, "HOA Treasurer Busted for Pocketing Disabled Vet's Rent," claims it was spiritual tax. The article detailed how she had actually used that phrase in text messages to her sister, explaining that weak people owed a spiritual tax to stronger leaders like herself. The fraud case moved quickly through the courts. Margaret's lawyer tried to argue that she had intended to use the money for community improvements, but the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. The security footage from the community center clearly showed her taking my envelope from the mailbox. Her bank records revealed the cruise purchase the very next day. The group texts where she bragged about her clever accounting were particularly damaging. During the trial, more victims came forward. The final tally showed Margaret had stolen over $70,000 during her 5-year tenure as HOA treasurer. Some of it came from fake fines she had invented, like charging people for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailboxes. Some came from legitimate payments that never reached their intended destination. All of it had funded Margaret's lifestyle of spa treatments, designer handbags, and tropical vacations. I testified about the impact her actions had on my life, the stress of potentially losing my home while dealing with my disability, the sleepless nights wondering how I would find another accessible place if evicted, the humiliation of being treated like a criminal when I was the victim. Duke sat beside my wheelchair in the courtroom, wearing his service vest, providing the calm presence I needed. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and delivered the verdict with a clear voice: guilty on all charges, 15 counts of felony theft, 8 counts of fraud, 3 counts of elder abuse since some victims were seniors, and 2 counts of violation of the Fair Housing Act for discriminating against me based on my disability. Margaret's jaw dropped as the judge pronounced her sentence. 7 years in state prison with no possibility of early release for the first 3 years, full restitution to all victims totaling $112,000 including interest and damages, 5,000 hours of community service upon release specifically working with disability advocacy organizations, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board or in any fiduciary capacity. As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Margaret turned to the courtroom and shouted with a shrill voice, "You're all jealous of what I built. This community will fall apart without me." Her red lipstick was smeared now, her perfectly styled hair disheveled. The judge looked at her sternly and added an additional $5,000 fine for contempt of court. Margaret's face went white as she realized her empire of garden gnomes and clipboard authority had crumbled completely, and she was led away in handcuffs, still muttering about community standards and proper procedures.